You ever look down at your palm and wonder what it's really woody? That M etched into your skin, carved there by nature, or maybe something far beyond nature, was never just a wrinkle. It's a signature, a signal, a mark that separates you from the masses. Because whether you accept it or not, you weren't built for the crowd. You weren't built for the routine. You weren't made to blend in. You were born marked. See, most people go their whole lives trying to fit in, camouflage themselves, hide their weird, shrink their voice, clip their wings. But that hasn't worked for you, has it? Every time you try to play small, something inside starts screaming, restless, like your soul is pacing in a cage. And that's because the M was never meant to blend. It was always meant to burn, to stand out. And deep down, you've always felt that pull, haven't you? That quiet sense that you were different. That maybe your pain wasn't pointless. That maybe your isolation was divine. That M is more than a letter. It's a symbol of mystery. A reminder that you carry something most people don't. That symbol says, you're not random. You're chosen. But here's the twist. Being chosen doesn't feel like a celebration. It feels like a curse until it's time. You carry weight others can't see. You think more. You feel deeper. You sense when something's off in a room before a word is spoken. And you question things will really question them. Structure, systems, yourself. And that questioning, that's not weakness. That's vision. That's leadership. That's spiritual DNA bubbling to the surface. The M doesn't come with a manual, but it does come with a mission. And your entire life has been trying to prepare you for it, even when it looked like destruction. Here's the thing most people miss: when God marks you, He isolates you. Because if you're going to carry a rare calling, you can't be trained in common classrooms. You had to learn in silence, in rejection, in failure. You had to break in private because your public purpose would carry too much weight to be fragile. And while others were getting applause, you were getting silence. Not because God forgot you, but because He was forming you. And now that M is activating, you see, the funny part is the enemy knew who you were before you did. That's why the hits came early. That's why the trauma wasn't random. Why the betrayals felt personal. Why you were hit before you even had a chance to build defenses. Because when you're marked, you're monitored. Not by humans, but by forces that sense your potential. They knew if you ever figured out what that mark meant. And now, you're figuring it out. You're not here just to survive. You're not here just to pay bills and post selfies. You're here to disrupt darkness. To speak things that unsettle comfortable cages. To carry wisdom that sounds strange to shallow minds. The M on your palm doesn't say maybe, it says move. You were designed to be a mover, a shaker, a storm inside the system. That's why nothing ordinary has ever satisfied you. That's why mediocrity makes your spirit itch. But let me be clear, being marked is not about ego. It's not about feeling special for the sake of it. It's about responsibility. The kind of responsibility that keeps you up at night, that makes you wrestle with God, that forces you to grow when you'd rather coast. Because when you're marked, comfort is no longer your compass, purpose is. So don't let the world talk you out of your identity. Don't let culture convince you that conformity is safety. It's not. It's just a slower death. You were designed to shake things, to think bigger, to move differently. You're not arrogant, you're aware. You're not crazy, you're called. You've got the mark, and now you've got the moment. Don't waste either. You've heard it before. You're different. Maybe it was whispered like a warning. Maybe it was spat at you like an insult. Or maybe it was said with awe by someone who could see what even you hadn't fully accepted yet. But what they were really saying, whether they knew it or not, was this: you don't belong here. Not in the shallow. Not in the predictable. Not in the program. And you've felt that your whole life, haven't you? That quiet sense of misalignment. Like everyone else got the manual and you were handed a puzzle with missing pieces. You sit in rooms full of noise and feel alone. You play the part, wear the smile, say the words, but your soul is somewhere else. Not lost, just waiting. That's what it means to be marked. To live with that divine discomfort. You're wired for something that doesn't exist yet, which means you're constantly walking through places that don't feel like home. Most people find comfort in routine. But routine suffocates you. Predictability feels like a prison, because you were never meant to settle in. You were meant to break out. Now here's the dangerous part. The world tries to convince you that your difference is a flaw, that your depth is a defect. They'll call you too much, too sensitive, too intense, as if those were insults. As if the fire you carry should apologize for not being a flicker. But let's call it what it really is, fear. People fear what they don't understand, and they attack what they can't control. So they label you to shrink you, hoping you'll fold into something more manageable. But you weren't designed to be managed. You were designed to be unleashed. You don't belong because you're not supposed to. Your frequency doesn't match the noise around you, because it's tuned to something higher. You hear things others don't. You see cracks in the smiles. You sense the undercurrents in conversations. You're not paranoid. You're perceptive. You're not antisocial. You're discerning. You don't need to be around everyone because you're already carrying enough worlds within you. That discomfort you feel in average spaces, that's your soul rejecting mediocrity. That's your purpose pulling on the leash of your patience. It's not anxiety, it's activation. Something inside you knows this isn't where I'm supposed to stay. And that knowing will torment you if you ignore it. It will haunt you in your sleep. It will erupt in anger, in sadness, in restlessness until you finally face the truth you've been trying to meet. You don't belong in the shallow because you're... But let's be honest, the deep is terrifying. It's lonely. It's dark. There's no map. No applause. No safety net. That's why so many people choose the shallow. It's predictable. It's accepted. But predictable doesn't produce transformation. And the path of the chosen, the ones marked by that M, the ones wired for more, it requires you to leave the familiar, to disappoint the comfortable, to step out even when your legs are shaking. You were never supposed to fit. You were supposed to stand out not for attention, but for alignment. You're not here to blend in. You're here to awaken. And yes, it costs you something. But let me ask you, what's the cost of ignoring the call? Of pretending you're fine when you're fading? Of shrinking yourself until you disappear? That's the real tragedy. That's the real risk. Dying with your fire untouched. So if you're walking through life and constantly thinking, why does nothing feel right? Good. That means you're still alive. That means the signal hasn't been muted. That means the mark is still pulsing, waiting. Don't ignore it. Don't numb it. Use it. Because the pain of not belonging isn't punishment, it's proof. Proof that you were never meant to settle in systems that couldn't contain your spirit. Proof that the world you came to disrupt will never be able to comfort you. You've heard the phrase, pressure creates diamonds. Sounds poetic until you're the one feeling the weight. Until you're the one stuck between forces so intense you start to wonder if you're breaking instead of transforming. But here's the truth nobody tells you: when you're chosen, especially one of the rare dark chosen ones, God doesn't just apply pressure, He isolates, disorients, even shatters what you thought was solid. Not to destroy you. No, that's what the world assumes. What's really happening is divine refinement. People crave clarity, but you, someone marked, someone with that rare spiritual blueprint, you've been called into chaos, into the wilderness, into nights with no sleep and days where nothing makes sense. And while others are busy chasing approval and building their image, you're somewhere deep, being stripped of everything false. Because let's be real, most people fail not because they're weak, but because they cling to what's comfortable. You weren't allowed to. Every shortcut you tried blocked. Every fake connection exposed. Every illusion you loved shattered in front of you. Why? Because what's inside you can't coexist with the counterfeit. See, when God marks you, He doesn't give you the luxury of mediocrity. He burns away the fluff. He removes the noise. You'll find yourself misunderstood, even hated by people you once thought were permanent. That's part of the assignment. You'll learn the hard way that most people love the version of you that fits their comfort zone, not the version that's becoming dangerous to the status quo. That version, the real one, has to emerge through pressure. And here's where it gets heavy. When God isolates you, it can feel like rejection. But it's really redirection. It's Him saying, you can't go where I'm taking you, carrying all of that. That includes dead weight relationships. That includes small thinking. That includes your old identity, the one built on survival, not truth. That version has to die so the real one can rise. And resurrection, it doesn't happen in public. It happens in the tomb, in the silence, in the place nobody's clapping for you. That's the womb of transformation. But this pressure isn't random. It's surgical. God isn't crushing you for sport, He's carving out capacity. You're not being punished, you're being prepared. And preparation doesn't feel like progress, it feels like losing. It feels like being behind. It feels like watching everyone else succeed while you're just surviving. But that's the illusion. See, public victory often follows private demolition. The ones who look like they're winning now, most of them won't last. But you're being built for longevity, for legacy, for something that lasts beyond applause. You ever notice how people ask for power, but they don't want the process? Everyone wants to rise, but no one wants to be refined. But the dark chosen ones, we don't get to skip that. We don't get the fast track. We get the furnace. And that furnace, it's sacred. It's where God reclaims you from everything you thought you needed. It's where He rewires your instincts, purges your fears, and silences your ego. You don't come out of that the same. You come out undeniable. And let me tell you something dangerous about reaching that point. Once you stop seeking validation, you become unstoppable. Once you learn to sit in the silence and not break, once you embrace the pressure and don't run, you become something society can't control. That's why the enemy fights you so hard. That's why life feels heavier for you. You're not being targeted because you're weak. You're being targeted because you're potent. So don't resent the pressure. Don't curse the silence. Don't mistake your breaking point for the end. Because that tension you feel, that unbearable stretch, that's your spiritual infrastructure being rebuilt. That's divine architecture. And when it's done, you'll carry something no one can take from you, not titles, not followers, not success, but authority. Not borrowed power, but earned presence. The kind that can walk into any room and shift the atmosphere without saying a word. They won't tell you this, but being chosen doesn't always look like light shining down on you with a heavenly choir in the background. Sometimes it looks like isolation, like betrayal, like being overlooked, forgotten, even mocked. People have this fantasy that if you're called, doors will open effortlessly. What they don't understand is that being chosen often means being hidden. Not because you're not ready, but because they're not ready for you. You know the irony. The world celebrates exposure, but God builds in obscurity. Think about that. Everyone's chasing the spotlight, desperate for validation. But the real ones, the rare, dark, chosen ones, they're being developed in the shadows. That's where the work happens. That's where you're stripped of everything you thought made you valuable, your accolades, your popularity, your image. It's where God teaches you that your worth was never in any of that. It was always in the substance. The part of you that remains after the applause dies. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. When God sets you apart, He allows people to misread you. He lets them misunderstand your silence, mislabel your boundaries, mock your growth. Because if you're going to carry what most people can't, you have to be trained to survive what most people avoid. Rejection, delay, silence. You have to become immune to the opinions that sway the masses. You're not being punished, you're being inoculated. Against the disease of needing approval. Against the addiction to being liked. Think about how many people crumble when they're not seen, not recognized, not celebrated. That's the trap. But when you're chosen, truly chosen, you don't move for claps. You move with clarity. You move because you know who sent you. You walk like someone who's already accepted the fact that not everyone will get it. And you don't need them to. Because purpose isn't a democracy, it's a revelation. You're not asking for votes. You're obeying orders. Now here's where the mind flips. Your silence has more power than their noise. Your presence, even in stillness, speaks louder than their constant need to be seen. Why? Because the rare ones carry weight, not volume, not popularity. Weight, and weight isn't loud. It's felt. And when you've been forged in silence, when you've endured enough loneliness to learn how to command your own thoughts, and you walk into rooms with something most people never develop, spiritual gravity. And yet with all that power comes a test. Because when you've been overlooked for so long, it's tempting to prove something when your moment comes. To flex, to stunt, to say, look at me now. But here's the lesson real chosen ones don't need to prove. They reveal. Their existence becomes the proof. Their survival becomes the message. The way they show up authentic, unshaken, unbothered, that's the flex. You weren't built for performance. You were built for impact. And impact doesn't require permission. So stop waiting for applause. Stop shrinking when you're misunderstood. Stop explaining your process to people who were never meant to witness it. They can't see you clearly because you're in a dimension they've never accessed. You're moving with instructions they weren't given. Trying to translate your calling in their language will only lead to confusion. This is why the isolation was necessary. This is why the doors had to stay closed. Because if they opened too soon, you would have stepped in with something still unhealed, still dependent, still craving validation. But now you've been tempered, you've been tested. And even though you're still evolving, what you carry is too expensive to be exposed prematurely. God didn't hide you to punish you. He hid you to preserve you. And when your emergence comes, and it will come, it won't be forced. It won't be flashy. It'll be undeniable. Because the ones who are chosen don't just appear. They arrive. And when they arrive, the atmosphere shifts, not because they begged for attention, but because they became something in the dark that cannot be ignored in the light. They always they. But what they don't realize is that difference comes with a cost. And not the kind most are willing to pay. When you're one of the dark chosen ones, your path isn't just unconventional, it's wired for chaos. You're not handed peace. You're thrown into storms and expected to find stillness within them. You're not praised for your vision. You're punished for seeing what others are too afraid to look at. And yet somehow you keep moving. Because deep down you know you've always known. See, people love the idea of a chosen one until they meet one. Because real chosen ones disrupt comfort. They don't play by social rules, they speak truth that burns through illusions. They challenge systems without trying. They expose everything fake just by being fully real. And that makes people uncomfortable. That's why you're constantly misunderstood. That's why they say you're too much, too intense, or too deep. But in reality, you're just operating at a frequency they've never tuned into. And this is where it gets critical. If you don't understand the weight of what you carry, you'll try to fit into places that were never built to hold you. You'll downplay your fire to keep others warm. You'll shrink your mind to make their insecurities feel safe. And you'll mistake tolerance for love. But listen carefully, you were not designed for their comfort. You were designed to provoke awakening. And awakenings aren't cozy. They're violent. They shake foundations. They burn bridges that were never meant to carry you in the first place. There's a psychological depth to being chosen that nobody talks about. It's not just about having vision, it's about surviving the loneliness that vision creates. It's walking into rooms where everyone smiles, but no one sees you. It's carrying answers while being treated like a question mark. It's knowing things you never asked to know, feeling things that don't belong to you, hearing what isn't said out loud. It's emotional weightlifting every single day. And yet you bear it. Quietly. Powerfully. Because that's what rare souls do. And this is the trap. If you start doubting your wiring because others don't understand it, you become a ghost of stone. You start performing. You mask your knowing. You silence your edge. You wear a version of yourself that pleases the room but poisons your soul. That's not nobility. That's spiritual suicide. And far too many gifted people died trying to be digestible. But not you. Not anymore. You didn't make it this far to become normal. You didn't survive the breaking just to blend in. You didn't go through hell just to be liked by people who've never been through fire. You carry a blueprint that breaks generational cycles. You carry presence that alters environments. That's why they're intimidated. That's why you intimidate yourself sometimes. Because when you're not pretending, your presence demands transformation. And not everyone is ready to transform. And here's the hard truth: you don't owe them comfort. You don't owe them clarity. You don't owe them an explanation for the way your light burns. All you owe is obedience to what you know deep down, that you were built for something that can't be taught, can't be bought, and can't be copied. That something is sacred. And it doesn't need consensus to be real. The sooner you stop apologizing for your intensity, the sooner you activate your destiny. You don't need to dilute your essence. You need to direct it strategically, intentionally. Because your intensity is the signal. It's the confirmation. It's the evidence that you weren't made for shallow waters. You were made for depth, for darkness, for disruption. So let them misunderstand you. Let them call you difficult. Let them label you a problem. Just remember, diamonds don't show up smooth. They show up cutting through stone.